This week on Life and Faith.
They gave us the Bible and told us to close our eyes and pray. When we opened our eyes, we had the Bible and they had the land.
The Enlightenment is about the great individual.
I get this cold feeling in my chest, my hands go sweaty, and it's decision time.
Social media makes us see ourselves as larger than we are.
How can I convince myself I'm a worthy person?
Welcome to Life and Faith from CPX. I'm Simon Smart. Those of us who live in Australia have grown up used to filling in government forms that include a question, are you of Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander heritage? And we either do or don't tick that box. But I'm struck by the fact that very few of us have had anything at all to do with people from the Torres Strait. You might even be a bit vague on where that is. So just to remind you, there's an archipelago of at least 270 small islands in the Torres Strait. So we're talking far north Queensland, Australia. So far north that you're getting a plane from Cairns, which seems very far north to southerners, and then boats of various sizes, and it's a long way. Thursday Island is one of the better known islands there, and it's about 40 kilometres north of Cape York Peninsula. My guest today is born and bred in the Torres Strait. He now lives on Thursday Island, but on the island he grew up on, Marbiag, on a clear day, looking out across the water to the north, he could see people going about their business in New Guinea. Well, we're going to hear about that part of the world today. Gabriel Bani is a community leader with a long family history as leaders in the Torres Strait. He's also a pastor, and when he was in Sydney for, among other things, an event looking at Indigenous spirituality and Christianity, I grabbed him for a chat. And to begin with, I wanted to know about Gabriel's growing up in that part of the world.
It was quite fun, actually, growing up. Just thinking back, most of our lifestyle centered around being out in the water, out in the sea, fishing or hunting, and also out on the reefs, diving for fish, but also just walking around, collecting food for us and seafood and turning over rocks and looking for, crabs or mud crabs. So really centered around the sea and the waters. But it was a very good environment, like we were growing up in. I think everything was centered around family.
You described to me earlier, we were chatting about your home and what you experienced there with a lot of people living together.
Yes, we grew up in what you would, I think, refer to today as overcrowding. Mm-hmm. But to us, that was like a normal way of living, normal way of life. It was a very safe and happy environment. And we would have about 20 to 25 people living in 2 or 3 bedroom houses. The housing was very difficult back then. And sleeping on the floors, just on mats, no mattresses, no beds. Everybody sleeping in the lounge area or the kitchen area. I still remember at nights, if you want to drink a water, you tiptoe around, bodies laying on the floor and get to the sink. But it was a very happy environment. Like looking back now and just beginning to understand our socioeconomic conditions that we were in. But it was actually, we didn't notice that. It was just growing up together, sleeping together, eating together and having fun. But the family really provided that shelter for us.
Yes, it was a happy, sort of warm community experience. Yeah. It's a vastly different environment in places like big cities like we're in now. What was it like for you to experience these sorts of environments in comparison to how you'd grown up?
That was very, what would you say, especially in Cairns, which would be our closest to a city, a big town. It did seem foreign, and you did seem a bit lost, but meeting people again that from up where you come from, that sort of helped with the stress levels and finding out where you were and where you were going, but very different environment as compared to up there. Coming down Brisbane, Brisbane way, Sydney way, it became very, very different. We smile a lot to people. We wave, we shake hands, we make personal contact, we make eye contact. That was something that I didn't receive when I ventured into the cities. I'd be looking over at somebody trying to say hi, but everybody would just be in their own space. And up there in TI on Thursday Island, you know everybody. Growing up and, you're driving a car around the island, you wave at every car going past and everybody on the sidewalk. The first time driving in Cairns, I started to wave at every car going past and people were looking at me
back.
silly and they were saying, "Who was that?" And I sort of realized, no, this is another world.
Tell us about totems. Now, what are they? What's your totem? And how do totems function in the culture of your people?
Totems are very central to our social structures. The word totem, as we use it today now, but it's probably a word from somewhere around North America. And we have our language words for that.
Yes, what would it be in your language?
It's our buai augad or buai urui. So, and that's associated with the clan, the kinship system, or the kinship structure. Elders in each particular group, they are responsible for that and making sure that the clan understands its totems, the genealogies, the relationships. So the totems determine inter-clan relationships, marriages, but also defining boundary lines, territories, which clan is responsible not only for land, but the reefs and the waters. So all of that sits under a particular totem group. On my community, we have 4 main totems, which is the crocodile. That's my totem. The crocodile is a major totem of a major tribe. Our tribe is Wagadagam, Kaibuai. And we have 3 clans along at Mabiag. And it's the Sipangur clan at Gamu. Their totem is the shovel-nosed shark, we call Kaigas. In the center of the island, we have Maid, the Maid Buai, which is the snake clan, Taub. And towards the east, we have Panay Buai, and that's their totem is the crocodile. So, yes. But under those, there are many other subtotems from our intermarriages and clan relationships to Papua New Guinea in the north and to the mainland to the south.
So they function as a sort of symbolically represent your people, your clan, but also as a sort of social structures.
Yes, and our totems are not objects of worship. They are mainly our source of unity, our communion, and strength, solidarity of tribes and clans, sharing those totems. And our festivals, harvest festivals, and our gatherings, seasonal gatherings are all under those totems. They bring us together.
Tell me about what it looked like for your people to first encounter Europeans. There were a lot of repercussions, serious repercussions, consequences for your people. Can you explain what some of those were?
The big one, if we look at cultures, we're really looking at worldviews, different worldviews. So that's where the actual, that clash of worldviews, when we hear today about dispossession or displacement of structures, it was all of that, especially our kinship structure and our social structures, big impact on that, and that was our main mode of survival, and everything about young people growing up, children, elders, and that's where it actually had that impact in dismantling those and our governance structures of how we governed ourselves. And
so how did that happen? So how were those things dismantled?
Well, first of all, everything that we did as part of our culture from the Christian perspective was called pagan.
Yeah.
So they had to dismantle our sacred meeting places where we met, our social gatherings. They put in curfews together with the government and the missions working together, where we weren't allowed to go beyond, certain time in our communities. And a lot of our social lifestyle was sort of, our lives were regulated, I guess, and controlled. We were told what to do, what not to do. Even relocated, you can't live here anymore. You have to live at a certain location. And in the middle of all of that, the things that matter to us, like our artifacts, our masks, our ceremonial things, that was all taken away and seen as pagan. Well, they said they were going to burn them, but later we discovered that they were in museums halfway across the world.
Have you been able to get any back?
We're still in the process. Some have come back a little bit, but other artifacts, as well as human remains. From my island alone, over 150 full body remains are still over there. Still negotiating to try to get them back, to put them to rest.
You talked about being forced out of particular areas where your people lived.
Yep.
Presumably with such attachment to land and waterways, this would have been a very traumatic thing.
Yes, it was. A lot of emotions. When people are being moved, it's documented as well that our people are crying and moving and packing up, and because they were moving away from their land. And see, I can only relate to us up there that even though we were moved around, but we still remained in our environment on the island. I really feel for families on the mainland here during that time where they were really
Taken a long way
away.
Land,
Yeah.
Yes. Well, tell me some of the kind of lasting negative impacts of European contact with your people. Where do you see the impact today in your area?
The one impact that I'm really concerned about, it has to do with what I mentioned earlier about different worldviews.
Yeah.
So it's to do with the way our people think today. Sometimes in frustration I say, we have black skin, but we think like the white man. And the value systems, because two different worldviews with very different value systems. So today's situation now, the impact has been our value system is not our own anymore, what we had before, especially in our social structures with the kinship systems and our clan systems. It's all come down to individual nuclear family thinking now, that thinking of individualism or individualistic thinking.
Yes.
That it's just you against the world, just you, yourself, your family. And that's the big one. And the practices that follow that, has to do with that. And there's big concern. People talk about the respect that existed or the relationships that existed before. But it's all changed. And people are still living up there in our environment, but they think like somebody else was living down in Sydney.
Now, you are a pastor.
Yes.
You've obviously embraced the Christian faith that came with Europeans. What did the missionaries bring when they came to Torres Strait Islands?
Our introduction to Christianity in my island, Mabiag, and in my tribe, was that my ancestor, my great-great-great-grandfather, he was the last convert on the island. Because they were South Sea Islanders with the missionaries, they were able to influence the other clan groups. But our clan group, which is the major tribe of the crocodile, didn't really accept that message. So at night, one of the nights, they sent the missionaries and the workers around to destroy my grandfather's gardens. And they did a good job in, back then the garden was the main supermarket, main source of food. And then he was very upset when he saw that everything was destroyed, and they told him that God had sent his angels during the night because God was angry with him for not accepting what was being introduced. So he still didn't go along with them to where the village was relocated to, because he was still at the back of the island. So they actually tied his hands up and his legs, and they put a pole through, how you would carry a pig. And that's how they carried him from where our village was to where they were going to relocate us to. He was the chief of the major tribe. And you can only imagine, what it looked like for people there. And so they brought him there, and they actually dealt with him to make him become part of the changes there. And so his son became part of the church. His son, my great-great-great-grandfather, he became a bellsman, and later on they started to become laymen and then priests. Now, that would make me turn away from
Yeah,
everything.
I was going to say, it didn't feel
But,
like a very inviting. It's amazing that your family have anything to do with this.
So,
now.
I guess you're wondering now how I came to be where I am. And
I am wondering that.
It was, it's the message. I always say, just I think to clear my mind up, but that's how God has been revealing himself to us now. It's the message that's sacred, but not the methods. We have become to make the methods sacred. And the message came, but it was wrapped in layers. If I may talk about Christianity a little bit, from my understanding, that it was I think a Roman or European interpretation or Roman influence. It was very much packed in something else. And sometimes you do look that it's not the same as how it actually started from day one. And that was introduced to us. It wasn't what was started in day one in the book of Acts. But we were actually, our culture and our village life reflected what was happening in Acts chapter 1 and 2. Wow.
This is the accounts of the early church.
Yeah.
And you feel like your
Sharing,
culture
looking after the widows, the orphans, and breaking bread daily, listening to teaching through our initiation sites, preparing you for life, and social structures that enabled you. Like if you see the difference between our law, the L-O-R-E, Yawadan, we call it Yawadan or Sab, and if you see the L-A-W, it sort of sits on the end. If you do something wrong, you face the consequences. But our L-O-R-E, you are taught the consequences, and that prevents you from
doing it in the first place.
It's so ordered because we didn't have fences, we didn't have gates, and you would just see a rock or a tree, and you can't cross over. That's how powerful that law is. But today we put up fences, and people still jump fences.
This is Life and Faith, and I'm speaking with Gabriel Bani, who is a community leader and pastor in the Torres Strait. We've been talking about European contact and especially missionary contact with the people of the Torres Strait. And it's fascinating to me that Gabriel feels he's able to distinguish between the message the Christian missionaries were bringing and the methods they used to do that.
I think we've always had that. I think every culture, every people, there is that knowing now, we, come to understand the Bible and to understand God, that He comes to us through His whole creation, and everything is pointing towards Him. And whatever we do, even if it's our totems, we know that they point towards something, I guess like the cross, which is a Roman symbol of punishment and death. But that's a form of totem as well, because it points to something, points to someone. Wow. And in that light, you can begin to understand more about the message of hope of a creator and his relationship with his creation, So that we embraced Christianity up there because there were a lot of similarities between our culture and the laws that we practiced, together with the Christian message, similar to the commandments. We had our commandments as well, our religious practices. We had our order of priesthood and how we practice ceremonies. So it was embraced up there, even though the way it was presented from a particular worldview. And I think sometimes that's why they call it light, because we were darkness. Well, we probably can say darkness as in sin and separation from God, but there's that colonial thing behind it, that, uncivilized and civilized. Yeah. But we were very civilized. And the light that happened in Genesis 1, let there be light, it happened. And then the light that Jesus brought into the world when he came, I am the light of the world, that happened as well. So this light is sort of in the shadow of those lights.
Sometimes people see the arrival of European culture and Christianity gets caught up in that.
Yeah.
And they say it's imposed on Indigenous people in a way that's sort of unrelentingly negative. You have a bit of a different perspective on that, obviously. You've embraced it as well as recognised some of the failings in the delivery.
Yes.
So what do you say to people who think it was just terrible and kind of an imposition?
When I speak to people, and maybe there's a general feel up there as well, there has to be hope in the end. You can't just talk about gloom and doom and nothing at the end of the tunnel. There is that other side where, the message of the gospel, but even things like, we had inter-island warfares before, when people would break trade agreements and trade routes, you had a very bloody wars, So the coming of the missionaries, it helped in that way as well in settling that down a little bit. But we always look at, from our perspective, I guess, as islanders, we always look at the side that builds us up and then gives us hope.
Yes.
I think we dwell on that more. We are a quiet people, Sometimes people over the years have referred to us as the silent people. We don't talk much as Torres Strait Islanders. We don't protest. You don't see us protesting much. We may join with our Aboriginal brothers and sisters, but our strength is our hands. It's the work that we do. Our work speaks for us. And despite those conditions and, imposing all this new Western lifestyle and way of life, but we were still able to work in there, even before the referendum in 1967, we did a lot of stuff that helped the country.
What could have been done better when you think of the way the missionaries came and brought their message? What could they have done differently?
One of the main things would be to listen, I guess, to the people. That would have been a good start, and then probably would have found out we had more in common than, and how we can share new ideas or new ways of, of the changes that were introduced. But I think, first of all, to listen to the people, because there is a lot of knowledge. There's a lot of wisdom that exists in, I suppose, cultures around the world based on survival, based on relationships, anything to do with society and life. And I think that knowledge now, today, in 2023, or in the era of 2000, people are now going back to find out that knowledge now to help us. And if only that was done back then, it would have been,
What do you think modern Western cultures could learn now from your culture?
I think values, valuing one another, that communal thinking, that we are all in this together rather than on our own. And what's mine is mine, what's yours is yours. But to learn that, no, we share this life. Everyone's been put here for a purpose, but we're all in this together. And that's the thinking and the worldview of our culture. It's a village concept. It's based on togetherness. And there's something that when I did experience coming down further into the cities, you can feel it, that it's not...
A lot of atomized cultures and people, and there's a lot of lonely people.
Yes, no, I noticed that, Well, even in Christian circles, in Christianity, it's a very individualistic look. Trying to interpret the Bible, trying to understand God from that perspective is very difficult, because everything in the Bible refers to a community. So the challenging us to, let's be a community, and then you can see the difference.
Tell me about what it's like for the Bible to come to your people, because you've been able to distinguish the message from the people who brought it. Tell me about what that Bible brought to your community.
Where will I start? Well, when it was presented in a way where it was the final authority about God and, like God's message to us. But even at the time, and I think more so, even now, people did not really have access. It was only the priests and the people and the missionaries who came with it. But it's interesting because now I'm thinking about, I don't know whether it was one of the bishops from Africa who said that they gave us the Bible and told us to close our eyes and pray. When we opened our eyes, we had the Bible and they had the land. So the thing is, that's running around in my mind here at the back. But
that's terrible.
But it was given to us, and
Despite that terrible, that's a terrible, oh gosh, that's awful.
Yes.
But you have somehow, I find it amazing actually, you've somehow been able to embrace that Bible, even though it came with a whole means to dispossess your people. It's just amazing actually.
Yeah, sometimes I get this, I get emotional.
Yeah.
And it's God, love. I think that was the game changer. The love of God. Yeah, I think when you accept that message in His purity, the message in His purity and His fullness, then you get to understand that personal relationship that we talk about with God, that changes everything. Yeah. And then you begin to see things differently. And I guess in the middle of all of that, what we're sharing here, I believe God came through. He managed to come through with all the stuff that was happening. Like, we know that the message, once it's received, it changes us on the inside. It shouldn't change our clothes. It shouldn't change our culture. But it changes you on the inside. And it works its way out. The system that was introduced to us is about changing us from the outside and making us look different on the outside. But I think today we still miss that message finding its place in the hearts of people. And that's where the difference comes from.
Gabriel, what do you think are the key needs of your people today?
The main one would be for us to have some control over our lives again and our environment. It won't be the same as before, but have some level of determining our future and how we run our lives. Because up until this stage, it has been run by somebody else, and we run the laws, the policies which govern us are still not the way we would like things to be. Because I think we have the solutions of how we can move forward, how we can become better as a people, but those solutions are not being properly heard. Like, we've made some improvements, a lot of improvements, but to have a greater say or control over our affairs. Yeah.
I want to ask you about racism and ways in which you have experienced that. Have you? And if so, in what sense?
Yes, there is, just growing up, looking for jobs, our career, all of that, aspirations and things. We've encountered a lot of that, even being part of the organizations that we worked for. There was a lot of that in there as well, how you're treated and how information comes to you, and how you're valued actually to give an input into things. Well, a few days ago, traveling down to Sydney, when we boarded the aircraft, me and my wife, so we had to go in through the back stairs here. Yeah. The others went through just depending on your seat, your row. And there was this big line, and we were the only Indigenous or Islander people walking, and there were all these Europeans. And one of the flight attendants, they were standing at the bottom of the steps and saying hello to everybody. And then when we walked past her, she stopped us and wanted to have a look at our tickets. And then we showed them, oh, okay, you're okay, then you can go. Then I stopped and I turned. If she was going to do that to anybody else, it was only to us. And I said, oh, is it the color of our skin? Why are you not stopping anybody else checking their tickets, It's just there, and I think people are not aware. that somehow we are a lesser.
Tell me what that makes, at that moment, what does that make you feel like?
Well, that anger, I was angry. And my wife said, no, just leave it. Like I was just going to say, I was going to start a whole big thing there, but then I decided, no, just walk away. But a lot of anger. But then after settling down as we were entering the aircraft, I just began to understand again that this is where we are at our point, this country,
a long
people,
way to go.
a long way to go. Yeah. But also, that's where we need to begin, as well, to complement things that are happening, nationally and in the political arena. But that individual, personal connection is really important.
Yes.
Families and people, houses, neighborhoods. Yeah.
I want to ask you about the voice to Parliament. What is your view of that, and how significant is it for people from the Torres Strait?
Yes. Torres Strait communities, I think a big part of the Torres Strait community, together with its elected leaders, have shown their support for the yes vote and to support the voice. We feel very strongly that this is a step forward for us up there in our region, in our nation of people, to achieve the outcomes that we're hoping for, in having greater control, over our lives and our affairs up there. But the voice, to me, it makes sense. I was in the delegation going over to Uluru in 2017, and I wasn't sure myself what I was getting into, getting over there, listening to all the discussions, the debates, the protests, the agreements, the disagreements, but just sitting back and observing all of that. The voice is the way forward. We support treaty, and our sovereignty has never been ceded. I am still a sovereign Wagadagam tribal man, and that will never change, whether we vote yes or no. Or whether we have treaty or not, in our own right. We believe that our birthright that's been given to us by God, and making us custodians of the area that He's placed us in, won't change. But a voice is an opportunity for us to be heard. And it is about policies and laws and influeing that. It is about a reform in our structures, the structures that govern us. And that's the one we're looking at changing, because as you know, structures empower, structures disempower. Structures can take away your hope, and structures can give you hope. And I think we have better structures that once our voice is heard and these changes are made, our life expectancy, our morbidity, mortality rates, only then can we see some change and improvement in all of that. But the voice, it'll provide a neutral place for us to sit on, like a mat, our traditional woven mat, where all of our diplomacy takes place, our trading and our discussions, our ceremony. But we sit on a place where we look to the past, but we have to look to the past together. And we look at where we are, and together we look of how we as Australians now can move forward. Because as you would know, and everybody knows, we can't change what happened. But it's about a starting point for us as a nation. It's going to need a lot of healing, a lot of saying sorry, a lot of forgiveness, and people will have to cry together. But once that happens at that place, and I believe God wants to bring us to that place and help us when we do get there, and then we can move forward. The voice will help us in that. And I know Queensland government has commenced the work towards path to treaty, and it's doing its own in a few other states, and that's just another big step towards hope for our people. But I guess those discussions need to take place, and Voice of the Parliament will be a very big help.
This has been Life and Faith with me, Simon Smart. Thanks to Gabriel Bani, who was in Sydney speaking at a panel event on Indigenous spirituality and Christianity. And that was part of the Gospel Conversations Conference. You can find them at gospelconversations.com. Please do send this episode on to someone you think might enjoy it, and send any feedback you might have to podcast@publicchristianity.org. We couldn't do the show without him, thanks to our producer extraordinaire, the imperturbable Alan Douthwaite. Next week.
Nothing that we had done had made any meaningful difference for these people. Now, the Taliban were back in control of that country. And they were our partners. They were our friends. We weren't an invading force. We were there by invitation. And we had wanted to make a better Afghanistan with them. And the brutal reality was it wasn't going to be a better Afghanistan.